Criminals and children. Generally speaking, we don't associate these two things together. We would find it unusual to be very concerned for the welfare of our incarcerated, the criminals, the bad guys in our society. We do, however, spend a lot of time caring about the welfare of our children, the education they're getting, the lives they're growing up with. But what do we do when these two areas meet? What do we do when we have children in our society who have also been convicted of crimes and are incarcerated? Within the next few minutes, I'm going to hope to unwrap some of this difficult, complex issue of child incarceration, why it's important that our juvenile detention facilities are places that are rehabilitative and healthy and safe for children to be growing up in, what is currently going on and being done to help children who have been incarcerated, and what future changes need to be made in order to make these truly rehabilitative. Very little research has been done within child incarceration. A lot of the research I found was from the 80s, the 90s, even the early 70s. And while we normally think that a lot of the research from decades ago would be obsolete, irrelevant, no longer correct, I found that a lot of this information was actually still accurate today. I've been tutoring at Camp David Gonzales for the past few months, and it was really unfortunate for me to see that a lot of the problems that are addressed in research from decades ago are still the problems that we're seeing today. The LA Times from May 1995 reads, "When repeat juvenile offenders are released from Camp David Gonzales in Malibu, they usually are sent home, back to the same streets where they learned to get in trouble in the first place." A student goes on to share his experience in this camp in 1995. "I want to get an education. The teachers out there in the public schools, they didn't really care. Once the bell rings, you're on your own." So we see that a lot of the problems that children were facing in the incarceration system years ago are still the problems they are facing today. For me, this lack of change and lack of evolving policy indicates a lack of resources that we're investing in our juvenile incarceration systems. So what do these juvenile incarceration systems look like? The California Research Bureau in 2008 offers a really comprehensive examination of what these look like in California specifically. LA County operates the greatest number of probation systems, with a grand total of 19 camps, 2 of which are for women, which you see here. Most of these are made up of the conventional model of detention camps. That means that they are able to go to school while they're incarcerated, so theoretically they can keep up when they're released, though we know that the public school systems are much more effective than juvenile incarceration systems. Camp David Gonzales is a really great example of what these conventional models look like. While each boy coming into this incarceration facility is tested for learning disabilities, ADHD, things of that nature, there's not any program that can help them learn, despite the fact that we know that they struggle with certain aspects. So we have all this information about these students, what resources they need, but there's no resources to actually give to them. Additionally, Holland and Cleric Law Corporation brings up this issue of putting children in adult detention facilities. So it is possible within Camp David Gonzales that you can stay incarcerated if your sentence extends past your 18th birthday. This causes a lot of problems. People who are incarcerated in juvenile detention facilities as young adults miss the critical first steps of adulthood. These include applying for a job, enrolling in community college, even enrolling in a university. So instead they're left to be continuing to repeat this high school curriculum that they've learned probably already if they've been incarcerated multiple times, because the curriculum continues to repeat, when they should be moving forward with their lives and becoming contributing members of society. The Washington Research Project in 1976 offered a lot of the same rhetoric that we hear today about children being incarcerated in adult facilities, which is equally as awful as adults being incarcerated in juvenile facilities. A lot of this rhetoric includes, oh, the community needs to be protected from these children. They need to learn a lesson early in life. But we see often the juveniles who are put in adult facilities become more withdrawn, distrusting of adults, and that correlates to higher rates of crime in the future. So we see the juvenile nor adult facilities are really beneficial for people ages 16 to 18 who are transitioning into adulthood. So now let's look at some of the effects of these juvenile probation systems and what isn't working. The Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice in 2012 offered a study on rates of reoffense and incarceration. Surprisingly, higher rates of incarceration and longer sentences does not decrease crime. In fact, as we see incarceration goes up, rates of reoffending also go up. So instead, we should be focusing on community-minded alternatives. So this can involve integrating the family into schooling, making sure they're having tutoring, that they're involved in sports teams, in arts clubs, things that are keeping them involved in the community instead of putting them away in detention facilities where they're given very few resources and places to succeed. I hope by now you're seeing that a lot of what we're doing to help minimize crime is actually doing the opposite, is actually increasing crime. This is going to require a lot of changes both on the institutional level and on the individual level for boys and girls in incarceration facilities. The California Juvenile Justice Policy Team in 2015 interviewed a number of young men who were in detention facilities, including Camp David Gonzalez, for what they most wanted to see change in their detention facilities. The most common responses included increased availability of various programs within the facilities, so more job training opportunities, more arts programs, things besides just school and work. They wanted better connections with their family, being able to contact their families more, as well as being mentored by camp personnel at a greater level, having those personal connections in their lives beyond just their gangs that they've now been separated from. They also wanted increased privacy and nutrition, especially in Camp David Gonzalez. We see the beds in the bathrooms, there's no privacy. It's one open room. They're not given any time to be by themselves, which is really important for teenagers growing up. Their brains are mixed up. They need time to kind of figure out who they are, especially when they make mistakes that have gotten them into probation facilities. Unfortunately, at the institutional level, there's very little that's being done for juveniles who've been incarcerated. However, the Massachusetts Coalition to Dismantle the Cradle to Prison Pipeline is one of the organizations that includes incarceration of children among their goals. This organization works to help people of color who have been incarcerated get reintegrated in society, as well as prevent them from winding up incarcerated in the first place. According to a study done by this coalition, 1 in 3 Black boys and 1 in 6 Latino boys will wind up in prison at some point in their lives. Now, to me, that's a really scary statistic. This coalition is a branch-off group of the Children's Defense Fund. So if you go to childrensdefensefund.org, you can find information about this coalition as well as the Children's Defense Fund in general. As soon as you go to the website, you'll see right away there's places where you can get involved, get connected. You can donate to this facility that'll help fund programs. You can also sign petitions. For example, not a lot of people know that juveniles are not entitled to a trial by jury, which causes a lot of problems for fairness within the juvenile court system. So if you go to this website, you can get a lot of information as well as donate, sign petitions, learn about reforms. But most importantly, you can get involved on a personal level. So here in the Pepperdine Volunteer Center, you can sign up to be a tutor at Camp David Gonzalez, which I can affirm to be an absolutely life-changing experience. While most of the people in these young men's lives are seeing them as the bad guys, the people who have no future, you can be alongside them to help them get the education they deserve and they need in order to get back on track. We want to punish them not for the rest of their lives, but rather rehabilitate them when we have the chance to in incarceration facilities. I hope you've seen today that juvenile incarceration is an issue that's hugely overlooked, underfunded, totally behind the curve. And I hope you recognize that juveniles who've been incarcerated are not people who don't have futures, who are lost causes already, but rather need the resources to succeed in the situation that they've been placed in. Juvenile incarceration is not an issue that is far from us, that's 15 minutes away at a camp through the canyon. It's impacting us right now. It's going to impact the next generation as the young men and women that are incarcerated right now become the future leaders of our society and the adults that our children are going to look up to. So since you all have been given the resources to succeed, you're here at Pepperdine, I encourage you to look at what resources you can now share with those to ensure that we are convicting the crime, not the child.